Hi, my name is Jonathan Lampe. My day job, I'm a product manager for a software firm. We do about $20 million of sales in software a year. Andy White works with me during my day job. Basically what we're doing in the night hours is looking at some emerging technology, things that are coming along that are going to affect our industry, that are going to affect other industries, basically in the software world. So the two things we want to talk about that we're going to throw darts at here in a second are IIS and Apache, which are, of course, the two leading web servers that you see out in the world today. There's also a little bit of Tomcat that we're going to talk about, too, for those folks who are involved in Java. You can look at a quick graph here as to what the current market uptick is of Apache and IIS. On the top in blue is Apache. In red, you see the Microsoft uptick. And so these are clearly the two web servers that are out there the most. And everything else is basically declining, except for that little tiny green line that you see down there. But we're going to come back to that in a minute. From the perspective of new technology, you have Apache and IIS, the two dinosaurs of the web server world. And one of the things that people are starting to encounter is problems with web server performance. Whereas, 15 years ago in a typical TCP connection, you might be able to, send hundreds and hundreds of sessions against things. It's not always happening with web server applications these days. One of the things that we're noticing, certainly as a product manager in my industry, is that budgets are down from a couple of years ago. Whereas a number of years ago, it was easier to get somebody to roll out a web farm full of systems and basically try to scale those things horizontally up and down, basically throw server boxes at the problem. In 2010, it's much less likely in the deployments that I'm seeing, sitting in the product manager chair and basically talking to other people in the industry. It's harder to get massive parallel deployments out there. And so performance is one of the things that's getting back on the table. How much effort are you really getting out of this box before I spend another 5 or 10 boxes on it? So again, another picture here of Apache and IIS wandering around the forest. We have a couple of little rodents, marsupials in the ground there. So we're going to start to talk a little bit about what is the evolution of these web servers. What is coming next if these dinosaurs are passing before us? But before we do that, I got a little technical here. A legacy web server, basically request comes in, it hits the web server, one thread is formed, the thread lives on and on and on until that response gets kicked back eventually to the user. Plus there's some time basically involved to spin up that particular thread. So this is the most expensive case. Basically this doesn't exist in the real world, but this is what we were shooting against, 10 years ago. Thread pools. Okay, this is a faster thread startup time. Potentially you can limit the life of the thread to whatever you're doing in your script here. So this is a thing of PHP. This was ASP, ASP.NET. But this would last for the duration of the request. The problem with this is that very frequently your script is really calling a web service, or your script is calling a database call. Your script is doing some other piece of remote I/O and sitting there and waiting. There's really no purpose to have this thread waiting for that. And so modern web servers basically break that up further so that you have probably callbacks and whatnot, so that you don't have a thread that's actually sitting there waiting. The benefit of that is more predictable performance, more predictable memory usage, and essentially reuse of critical resources. Here's a quick graph of one of these next-generation web servers. Essentially, what is the memory usage going on here when you have 3,500 connections versus a lot more? Another thing that these next-generation web servers are bringing to the fore is the ability to solve this thing called the C10K problem. Essentially, can you throw 10,000 connections against a single web server and have it stand up? That has been a theoretical barrier in our particular industry for years and years and years. And the next generation web servers that are being brought up go past it. But it's not just at the 10,000 session limit that this is happening. This is happening at smaller numbers of requests. So here's a graph, for example, of 2,000 requests and under coming into an Apache web server or coming into one of these next generation web servers. And basically same application built up under either. The response time, again, because of the predictable memory usage and other resource usage, is small. So the rodents, again. These are the guys that take over after the dinosaurs. And I'm really going to look at 3 things today, again, because we have this very limited time. But there are 3 that I want to look at, basically based on what you might be most familiar with in web servers today. So let's talk about Apache first. And Apache, again, the top web server that's out there in terms of usage. The one that you really need to be looking at if you're in Apache is this thing called Nginx. Nginx, again, has that profile. It has a predictable memory usage. It has great performance. It has support for many of the types of scripting languages and whatnot that you see under Apache. If you're looking at IIS, there's essentially an embeddable web server called Kayak that brings forward these benefits to people who are otherwise dealing with programming in a .NET world. There's a couple of other projects out there, but Kayak is definitely one to look at if IIS is the thing you're most familiar with. In the Java world, of course, you have Tomcat. And Tomcat 7 doesn't necessarily apply to this, but let's say you're looking at Tomcat 6 or earlier. Look at a product called Jetty. And Jetty is, like a lot of Java things, it's something that can be a standalone web server. It's something you can embed into your own Java applications. It can live in both worlds. So it's a pretty cool little project. All right, back to the graph. If you were paying attention, my last graph stopped at about 2008. This one goes to 2010. Again, you have Apache on top. You have IIS number 2. And this little green line coming off the bottom, this is one of these next generation servers. This is Nginx. And Nginx is doing a lot of the caching on the web. It's doing a lot of what you see, especially through places like YouTube, where you need a lot of throughput and you need predictable performance. Oh, this is just a pretty thing. This is just basically a reminder to keep in mind that these are the key servers to take a look at. Nginx, Kayak, Jetty, IIS, and Apache are potentially looking at phasing themselves out. I thought there was one more slide here. But I'll just talk through it. It flashed through? OK. The last thing I just wanted to point out is that, all right, it's not going to show us this. But anyway, the types of evolutionary technology we're talking about on websites are also happening in a couple of other layers. And that's principally what the work on the website that Andy and I are involved in, DivConq.com. That website starts to talk about some of these next generation technologies at various layers and making sure that you have elastic architecture all the way up and down the stack. That's it for me. Thank you very much.